Former Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson is now being linked with a loan move to the Championship in January, with former club Sunderland already being name-dropped as a potential destination for the former Liverpool skipper. In today's video, we're going to be diving into this story a little bit deeper, looking at Henderson in 2024 and whether or not a move for him would make sense for Championship clubs right now. But it's obviously an eye-catching transfer rumour which has got quite a few people talking right now. And after all, this is the BenHD YouTube channel. We love to cover transfer gossip. I'd love to get some of your guys' perspective on this rumour in the comments down below, whether or not you'd be open to your club taking Jordan Henderson on a potential loan deal in the January transfer window, because there are a few different aspects about this rumour. Some pros, some cons. Basically, this rumour first emerged a couple of days ago from The Sun, claiming that Henderson's lack of game time at Ajax has led to a few English clubs whipping up an interest in the experienced midfielder. Now, obviously, take this transfer rumour with a pinch of salt. The Sun can be hit and miss when it comes to transfer rumours and things like that, but I wouldn't be totally surprised if there is a bit of valid information behind this rumour, because for Henderson itself, it's been obvious that he's been struggling since leaving Liverpool a couple of years ago. The move to Al Ettifaq in Saudi Arabia was an absolute disaster, both on and off the football pitch. His reputation took a real hit on the back of taking that move, and he only lasted a few months before he left and obviously ended up at Ajax. And since moving to Ajax, that move hasn't exactly materialised how Henderson would have been hoping for either. According to the report, some Premier League clubs have been alerted by Henderson's situation, but there are also leading Championship sides who are considering a loan deal in January. While not everyone would be on board with this potential move for Henderson back to the Championship and to Sunderland in particular, EFL pundit Carlton Palmer thinks that it could be a decent move for the Black Cats. Speaking to Football League World, Carlton Palmer said what a return that would be if he could go back to Sunderland. They're flying high at the top of the Championship, and signing someone like Henderson could be the catalyst that sees them get back to the Premier League. That would be an unbelievable bit of business from Sunderland. It would be great for the supporters. But is Jordan Henderson the sort of player that Sunderland need right now, and would he give them that extra edge to really push for promotion in the second half of the campaign? Let's have a look at some of the stats. So for Jordan Henderson so far this season, and why he would potentially be available for a move this summer, he's only started in 2 of Ajax's Eredivisie matches up until this point of the campaign. He's not been a regular starter under the new boss there. To be fair to Hendo, he does have an average match rating of 6.9 when considering he's come off the bench on 3 occasions. That's not all too shabby. His underlying statistics have also been fairly standard as well. 1.2 tackles per 90, 1.6 interceptions, albeit a very small sample size of matches here. To sort of further illustrate how Henderson hasn't really been fancied in the Ajax setup so far this season, of all of Ajax's players so far this season in the Eredivisie, Henderson ranks 15th for minutes played with just 189. And that's despite being by far and away the highest paid player in the Eredivisie. Now, any potential loan deal for Henderson coming to the Championship, this right here would be the biggest stumbling block. We're taking these numbers here from Capology. Obviously, when talking about footballers' salaries, you can never be 100% accurate, but they tend to be the best website when judging footballer wages. Reportedly, he's on just over 75 grand a week at Ajax, obviously nowhere near the sort of money he was previously earning at Al Ettifaq, but this would make him by far the highest paid player at Sunderland, who have been pretty rigid with their wage structure in terms of how they've gone about their business in recent years. But is Henderson someone worth blowing the bank for on a potential loan deal? That's up to Sunderland to answer. Worth stressing as well, he still has 2 years left on this deal at Ajax at 75 grand a week. So the notion that he'd, take a massive pay cut to go to the Championship with still that money to come into his bank account, I don't see happening. I think a loan move is the most realistic thing if Henderson was to leave Ajax at this stage. But for Sunderland themselves, where would Henderson fit into this setup under Regis Lebris right now? Well, so far this season, this has been their sort of most standard lineup, you'd say. Obviously, with a midfield 3 here of Daniel, Joe Bellingham and Chris Rigg. Obviously, ignore Jack Clark here, who's still on the left-hand side of this graphic, he's no longer at the club, but you'd probably argue two of the outstanding players from this Sunderland side so far this season have been two of their midfielders. Joe Bellingham's been absolutely brilliant, as has Chris Rigg. Worth stressing though, they obviously play different roles to someone like a Jordan Henderson, who would obviously come to fill in a very different position. In years gone by, Henderson's obviously been someone who brings plenty of energy to the pitch as a box-to-box midfielder, but being 34 years old now, you'd imagine he'd be more of that sort of sit-in player who'd come into the Dan Neil position. And it's an interesting one for Dan Neil because of all of the Sunderland regular starters so far this season, he's probably been the one who hasn't quite been up to his usual standards so far. Would that be fair to say, Sunderland fans, or am I just being a bit too harsh after maybe that penalty he gave away in that Watford game? Obviously, with Sunderland as well, you've still got someone like an Alan Brown to throw into the mix, a very good, experienced championship player, plenty of energy, and I think a lot of Sunderland fans have really taken well to him so far. And it's also worth remembering that Sunderland still have Salis Abdul Semed to throw into the mix as well, who was brought in to be that sort of holding midfielder for them this season. He's obviously joined Sunderland on loan from Lens in League 1. He's not been able to feature for the Black Cats so far this season because of injury. But when he gets himself back to full fitness, if you're potentially bringing in Jordan Henderson as well, you've already got Dan Neil in that role, Alan Brown, someone who's chomping at the bit to get back into that starting 11 on a regular basis. You got a really competitive midfield there you're building up. Obviously, along with the youngsters who have been absolutely thriving so far this season. In terms of Henderson's role in that Sunderland side, though, leadership is the obvious thing that he brings to this group. Sunderland have by far the youngest team in the Championship, an average age of just 23 years old. There was that clip that was going around about lockdown time while Henderson was still playing for Liverpool, and you could just hear how vocal he was on the pitch. Obviously, with no fans in the stadium, you really sort of appreciated that side of Henderson's game a lot more. But I think it was one of the Liverpool players that said it at the time. He was basically like a manager on the pitch, organising players all the time, telling people where they need to be. And I think having a squad as young and malleable as that Sunderland side right now, a figure like Henderson coming in, while he may no longer be at the peak of his powers, and there's an argument to say maybe his legs might have gone at this point, technically he'd still be brilliant, and as that voice on the pitch for some of those youngsters especially, who I think would take to Henderson's words just like an absolute sponge, that could be absolutely invaluable, especially to a Sunderland side who, if they continue performing like they are, really could catch fire for the rest of the campaign and potentially be in contention for automatic promotion. What better player to have in your corner to keep everyone calm in those moments of pressure than someone like a Jordan Henderson, who's won, pretty much every trophy on offer at club level. But while I have seen plenty of Sunderland fans who would be open to this sort of move for Henderson, I do think it is worth recognising the other side of the coin as well. And there are a fair few Sunderland fans who think that maybe moving for Henderson at this stage of his career wouldn't quite make sense for the club, whether that's financially or for other reasons. Philip West, a Sunderland fan, for example, on X has had his say on the situation. Given how ridiculously good Chris Rigg and Job have been, with Alan Brown looking great, Dan Neil with room to improve, and Salis Abdul Samed yet to even feature, the idea of bringing back a past his prime and morally bankrupt Jordan Henderson makes zero sense at all. I think a very similar example of this Henderson story that we've seen in the Championship recently would probably be Aaron Ramsey and his return to Cardiff City. Probably a player of a similar sort of level as Henderson, obviously someone who's been wildly successful throughout his career, but clearly not up to that same standard anymore. He made that romantic move back to Cardiff last year, and since that point, while Cardiff fans have been treated to some great memories of having Ramsey back in a Cardiff shirt, you wouldn't say that that move has been a roaring success, certainly how a lot of people thought it might have been at the time. Obviously, Ramsey's injury record has contributed to that, a few external factors as well, but it is something to bear in mind when bringing back someone like a Henderson at this stage of his career. But honestly, I think it's a really interesting topic, and Sunderland fans, I'd love to get your take on this one in the comments down below. If Henderson is made available for a loan deal, Do you want to see your club throwing everything at him to try and get a deal over the line? And obviously I'm opening the floor here to other fans of other Championship clubs as well. I'm sure if Henderson is made available, there'll be more clubs than just Sunderland throwing their hat in the ring for him. Could Leeds United, for example, be sniffing around this sort of deal as they look to patch up their midfield issues? I don't know, I think it's an interesting one. Do leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. But other than that, I'll leave it there and I'll see you all in the next one.